hope everybody is having an awesome night. Inshallah, we have an amazing lecture planned. My name is Taha, and I will be your MC. First and foremost, we will have the recitation of the Quran by Hussain.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صدق الله العظيم.
Brother Hussain, for that awesome recitation. I'd like to thank everybody on behalf of the Royal MSA for coming out tonight. This is our second part of the series of identity conflict, and it will be given by Mufti Hussain Kamani. Mufti Hussain Kamani was born and raised in Elizabethtown, Virginia, Kentucky, and his journey to pursue sacred Islamic knowledge began at the age of 6. By the age of 9, he was able to complete the memorization of the Quran. To further advance his study of Islamic sciences, he later traveled to the United Kingdom and pursued formal Islamic authorization, ijazah. For 7 years, Mufti Kamani studied a rigorous curriculum covering the Arabic language and literature, Islamic jurisprudence, tafsir of the Holy Quran, hadith, Islamic philosophy, and aqidah. Afterwards, he was selected for a postgraduate level course in Islamic law and legal verdicts, which he completed within 2 years. He later earned his graduate degree in business management from the University of Coventry in the UK. Mufti Kamani currently resides in Chicago, Illinois with his family, where he has served as an imam for 6 years. He also serves as an instructor for Qalam Institute, where his class prophetic code has been studied by thousands of people. By the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is the co-founder of KamaniOnline.com, an internationally recognized clothing brand for men's designer wear. During his pastime, he also enjoys jiu-jitsu. Tonight, we are blessed and honored to have Mufti Hussain Kamani join us for a second time. And if you guys were not here for the first time, it was awesome. It was really good. So before we start, I'd like to make one request, and that is that anyone that is recording, if you can, please don't record. We will record ourselves. We will send out a live version. But because of the nature of the topic, we're asking that nobody records it. And without further ado, I welcome Mufti Hussain Kamani.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina istafa. Khususan ala sayyidina Rusuli wa khatamil anbiya wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa ashabihi amma ba'd. There is a tradition of Umar radiallahu anhu. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he was a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who had dedicated his entire life to the service of the deen. And if anyone ever has the opportunity to study the life of this man, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, it truly amazes you how a person lived a life that was so selfless. During his rule, the countries that were conquered are amazing. The land that was conquered by the Muslim armies is phenomenal. It shocks you. You think to yourself, what did this guy do? How did this guy really have it reach so far that during his rule, during his Khilafah, such a large portion of the land is conquered? So Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he shares this incident, and I think I shared this with you guys last week, but I'll start with this very same narration again. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu shares this narration that one day his servant says that he was returning back from Hajj, and that was the final Hajj he performed of his life. And while Umar radiallahu anhu was performing, he stopped at one point and he began to look into the valley, and Umar radiallahu anhu started crying. It was a flashback. He remembered a moment earlier on an incident that occurred earlier on in his life. And while Umar radiallahu anhu was standing there, he started crying, and one of his servants asked him, "Why are you crying, Umar?" So Umar radiallahu anhu says that I was a kid, and my father used to send me with the animals to graze them, and I would bring them to this very same valley. And I would let the animals loose. I was a kid, and I would lie against that tree over there and go to sleep. My father would wait for me in the evening, and when I would return back home, he would come to search for me. And he said my father would find me here, the animals were scattered out, there was nothing or no one protecting them. He would then take a branch from this tree and he would break it and he would beat me up. And he would beat me up so severely that my body would turn red. And Umar radiallahu anhu says, my father used to say to me, Umar, what is going to happen to your future? You can't even take care of animals. And at that point, the narrator says, Umar started crying. And he repeatedly said, Umar couldn't take care of animals. Umar couldn't take care of animals. Umar couldn't take care of animals. And then Umar radiallahu anhu said, the Umar who couldn't take care of animals, today there is no person on the face of the earth that stands between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no one that stands between him and Allah. It's just, he is the Khalifa, and the Nabi is not. So it's him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when a person can make such a statement that no one lies between myself and Allah, that's a very powerful statement. And had anyone in the world ever made this statement other than Umar radiallahu anhu, who would have doubted it? Yes or no? Had any scholar made the statement that no one lies between myself and Allah, who would have doubted that statement? What kind of statement is this? What reality is there behind this? But when it comes to a man like Umar radiallahu anhu, there is no person who has iman in their heart, faith in their heart, who can ever doubt that statement, because they know that statement was absolutely true. It was no exaggeration at all. Umar radiallahu anhu was a man of balance. He one day addressed his companions and said to them, that live a life of balance. Not too much hope, not too much fear. Don't be so hopeful that you only think of Allah's mercy, that you engage in sins because you are optimistic of Allah's mercy. And at the same time, don't live in so much fear that you become fearful of your own deeds, that you stop worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This also happens. There was a sister who contacted me a few months back. I was at an airport and she called me. She said, Sheikh, I need to speak to you. I said, I have to board a plane. She said, I need to speak to you. It's very important. As soon as he said that, the lady behind the counter announced that our flight got delayed 15 minutes. I said, Allah's forcing me to speak to you. Go ahead. Right? So I was talking to her, and she said to me, Sheikh, I went to college. It's very similar, kind of like what we were talking about last week. She said, this girl, by the way, she's from Europe. She said, I went to college. I was a good lady, good girl, grew up in a very traditional household. Always, was in good company, was told to dress properly. We're very family-oriented people. And she said, I came to college, and I was very bright, and I was doing great in my classes, and then I met someone. She met a guy. And we got close to each other, we started getting to know each other, and then it started off as very formal conversation, then Shaitan took us from one step to another, to another, to another. Now these are her words, and I quote her on her words. She said, I've done something so bad that even I can't live with myself anymore. And the interesting part was that she said that when I committed that sin, it didn't even hit me that the sin was something bad. I didn't feel any guilt, any remorse. It was just, I committed the sin and I moved on. One day I was sitting, they call it the ISOC, you guys here call it the MSA. I was sitting in the ISOC, ISOC stands for the Islamic Society. She said, I was sitting in the ISOC room, and there was a Quran there, so I picked it up, and I opened the page up, and there was a translation. So the ayah that I saw right there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشًا وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. That don't even go close to adultery, because it's a very immoral thing and a very bad option, a very bad pathway of life. And she said that when I read that verse, that's when it struck me that I had committed such a great sin. And that began to bother me so much, so much, so much. She said to me that I'm at a point in my life that even when I go to the washroom, I'm crying. Because I can't live with myself, that I committed such a big sin. What if Allah is angry with me? So I sat down and I talked to her, I explained to her, look, Allah is forgiving. Make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you sincerely repent to Allah, the scholars, they mentioned there are 3 conditions. Imam Nawawi actually writes this in the beginning of his Riyadh al-Salihin. There are 3 conditions that if a person meets, he will definitely be forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some scholars, they add other conditions. My teacher used to put 4 down. So the three Imam Nawawi says that I'll add the fourth one at the end. Imam Nawawi says that if you meet these three conditions, your sins will definitely be forgiven by Allah. What are the three conditions? The first thing, you have to leave the sin. You can't continuously commit the sin while you're repenting to Allah. So, for example, if your sin is that you lustfully look at someone from the opposite gender, you can't be glaring at them and say, astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. Not a good thing. You have to stop it, okay? So you have to first of all cut the sin off. And even though that may sound funny, but many of us, we make tawbah to a sin that we're actually committing. We say that, oh Allah, I promise I won't hurt anyone, while we've already hurt someone and we haven't apologized to that person. So the first thing, you have to learn to truly leave the sin. The second thing, you need to have remorse over your sin. The idea of remorse is very important. And I want you to think of remorse kind of like your sensory system in your body. It's very important. Without remorse, you are spiritually dead. Just like without your senses, you're physically dead. So imagine this, if I couldn't feel in this hand right now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Bad thing, right? I mean, like some people might think, oh, that's cool, you get punched, you won't feel it. Well, that's true. Maybe if I get punched in my jaw, I won't feel it. If I numb that area, fighters do that, you guys know that, right? They take injections to numb certain parts of their bodies if they know that they're going to get hit there. I'm a fighter, trust me, I know how it works, right? So, but the problem is that if you do numb that part of your body, if you get hit there, you won't know when to retract. You understand that? So let's say, for example, someone punches me in the jaw. If I feel the pain or I feel my jaw is dislocated, then I'll stop the fight. I'll walk away, run away, whatever it is. But if I can't feel anything and you keep hitting me, I won't know, and I'm not only going to dislocate my jaw, I'll probably just go flying off altogether. If you take a nail and poke it in my hand, what am I going to say? Ouch, that hurt. And if I don't say ouch, I won't realize it, and you're going to keep drinking that nail into my hand until it's going to go all the way through. So your senses, your sensory system is very important, that you feel pain. If you don't feel pain, then you'll die, because you won't know when to retract and then when to retreat. So similarly, just as your physical body has senses and your sensory system keeps you alive, your spiritual body or your spiritual existence has called something called remorse. And as long as remorse is there, you can continue to build up and stand up again. But if remorse is removed from the equation, then there's very little hope that remains. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He mentions three different types of the nafs. The nafs is like the inner being of the human being. There are three different levels of the nafs mentioned in the Quran. One is the type of nafs we don't want to go anywhere near. And then you have the type of nafs we want to be at. And then the middle level of nafs where most people are. What are they? Nafsul amara, nafsul lawama, nafsul mutma'inna. Okay, they're all three mentioned in the Quran. Nafsul amara means it's that nafs, that inner being of the human being, that inner self of the human being that encourages you to sin. A person goes so far from Allah, they go so far from Allah, they go so far from Allah, that every time they think of entertainment, a sin comes to their mind. They go so far from Allah that every time they think of recreation, a sin comes to their mind. Every time they think of pleasure, a sin comes to their mind. And as soon as they think of something that's good, an act of obedience, their heart turns away and they don't feel good about it. They feel like, oh, I'm not going to enjoy this at all. Who wants to attend a lecture on a Tuesday evening? That's such a boring way to spend your evening. So that's what your heart tells you. Your buddies tell you, let's go pray salah, and your heart tells you, I don't want to go. I really don't want to go, and your buddy's forcing you there. So that's that nafs that you're in right there, what we call nafsul amara, that encourages you to sin. And as soon as you sin, you feel that relief, you feel that happiness, you feel that joy for that moment that you are looking for. The second type of nafs is what we call nafsul lawwama. Nafsul lawwama is the regretful or the remorseful soul. It's the soul that sins, but as soon as it sins, it feels the pain of sinning. Okay? So now, in your heart, you feel that it's recreation time, it's free time, I have a few hours open, let me go smoke something. Or let me go drink something haram, for example. Now, we're all human beings, and shaitan is biased, he's whispering, and we will probably end up committing sins. But when you commit that sin, this second level of nafs, which is called nafsul lawwama, it makes you feel remorseful. As soon as you drink that thing, you feel regret. You feel bad. You cry over it. You feel guilty with yourself. You know, I'll share with you guys one story. I'm an imam in Chicago, you guys know that. I was in my office and this guy came to me. Actually, this girl called to the full screen. This lady, she called me, she said to me, Sheikh, I'm having a very big issue in my marriage, and I think it's going to end. So I said, what happened? So she sat there and told me the whole story that, you know, they were married for a long time, they had kids, and this, that, and the other, and she found out her husband was cheating on her. So I said, astaghfirullah. Okay, so before you make your decision, let's sit down together and talk about it first. So her and her husband came in, I sat down and talked with him, and I found out when she was talking about cheating, it wasn't like cheating as in he stepped out of the marriage. What he was actually doing was looking at haram, and he was engaging in the haram act. You guys understand the rest, okay? So I said to her, look, I need to talk to him for a moment. He stepped out of the office. So she stepped out of the office, and her husband was there. And I was talking to him. And I said to him, why? You have a wife, mashallah, she's so beautiful. She loves you so much. You have kids, you have a family. Allah's given you wealth. You have everything. Why would you do such a thing like this? Don't you realize by looking at something haram like this, your wife, now that she's found out, you've shattered her heart into a million pieces. How are you going to build that again now? So he said two things to me that are very important. I want to share two things with you, he said. The first thing that he said was a reality. And I've experienced this reality as being an imam and someone who's gone to college myself and dealing with young men and women growing up in the West. And the second thing he said brought tears to my eyes. The first thing he said was, Sheikh, this was a habit I ended up building or getting addicted to when I was young, when I was in high school, college. You know, technology was there, shaitan guided the pathway, and I got addicted. And I thought to myself that when I got married, I would stop. But little did I realize that when I got married, I only stopped for a few months. Then after that, I got caught in the cycle of the sin again. And I constantly hid it, and I thought that my wife would never know about it. And at that point, I said something to him. I said, look, my friend, I'm going to share something with you. There is a book written called Talbis Iblis. Anyone ever heard of that book before? Yes, some of you guys have? I believe it's also translated in English. Talbis Iblis. The translation, if I'm correct, is called The Deception of the Devil. Talbis means deception. Iblis is the name of shaitan. Talbis Iblis. So in there, the author, he talks about the different methods shaitan uses to deceive a person. How does he fool you? So he talks about how shaitan fools scholars. Very interesting. How shaitan fools women, how shaitan fools men, adults, kids. And he talks about all the different ways. So in there he says that shaitan makes you feel like, he first beautifies a sin. That's where he starts from. Where does it all start from? It all starts from beautifying a sin. If there's something you're disgusted to, would you ever do it? Now, we're all adults here, so we can talk about these things. Hopefully you guys can be respectful of the gathering and be mature about it. There's a book called Pornifying. Have you guys ever heard of it? It's written by Pamela Paul. I encourage anyone who ever intends to work with the youth to purchase this book. You can buy it from Amazon for $10. She discusses how the pornography industry actually works. And how the pornography industry is a battle against your intellect and your emotions. Such a fascinating book. I would encourage every person. I didn't hear about this book until Sheikh Hamza Yusuf once told me. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf said, Mufti, read this book. So I went back home and I ordered it. My wife said, what kind of book is this? She only saw the title, she freaked out. I said, relax. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf recommended it. She said, okay, go ahead. Pornified. You can buy it from Amazon. The author's name is Pamela Paul. And then she talks about this idea of how it's actually an intellectual battle. There are things that human beings would never do because it's against our nature. You know, but what happens is that people, it's kind of like a rubber band. It only goes as far, then you pull a little more. Then you push the threshold a little more. You push the threshold a little more. So she talks about this idea how people who are amateurs in watching these things, when they first start off watching them, there's only one or two categories of that, whatever they're viewing, that is suitable to them, and then everything else, they look at it as if it's disgusting. Whoever watches it is a moron, an idiot. That person should commit suicide, right? Then let a little time pass by, and then very slowly now they're building, that threshold is pushing, and they're going further into it, I dealt with this case once where someone is telling me, the couple, they were sitting in front of me, and the only way the husband felt excited was if the wife actually vomited on him. Okay? So that was their level of intimacy. Now when you look at that, you think to yourself, SubhanAllah, how can a person ever feel excited if someone's vomiting on them? That, the smell and the filth everywhere, and there's, it's not a good scene. But it comes down to this idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, and actually Ibn Jawzi mentions in this piece. He says, that I will beautify the sin for them. أُزَيِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ أَعْمَالَهُم وَلَأُزَيِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ أَعْمَالَهُم. That I will beautify the sin for them. And when the sin is beautified, that's when you begin to walk towards it. The first thing. The second thing is shaitan, not only does he allow you to commit the sin, he actually helps you committing the sin by making you feel like you're an expert at it. And you don't realize, but shaitan is the one who's digging that grave for you. And you commit it, and you commit it again, and again, and again. And right when you're standing deep in that grave and there's no exit anymore, then a part of shaitan's plan is to expose you. Because when he exposes you after you think you're a pro at committing a sin, that's when your life literally comes crumbling down. Because there's nowhere to run anymore, no one to trust you anymore. It's very, very, very important that you are aware of how shaitan attacks you. The second thing this guy told me, so I said to him at that point, look my friend, it's a little late now, you're married, you have kids, but I want to tell you one thing. If there's something, and I want to share this with you guys because it's relevant to you, right? If there's something you're doing in your life right now that you want gone, you need to remove it before you advance in life. Don't think miraculously somehow when you get married or when you graduate from here, or when you get a job or when you have kids, you're going to change. You are you. Until you don't want yourself to change, you're not going to change. There's no one else that can come in your life and change you. You are you. Trust me, there are men and women who go all the way to Mecca and Medina for Hajj season and they still don't pray Salah. You know, I was once gone for Hajj and my next door neighbor, they never used to go for Salah. And I said to them, you guys came from so far, why don't you go pray Salah in the Haram? They said, we're watching the NBA playoffs. I kid you not, they used to watch ESPN all day. They used to do Jamaat in the hotel room. And I thought to myself, if there's anything that was going to change a person, it would be visiting Mecca, it would be visiting Medina. And it's a very spiritually uplifting journey. So the first thing is you have to learn to change yourselves. If you see there's something wrong with you, change it yourself. The second thing this guy said to me was, Sheikh, when I commit the sin, I kid you not, I sit down and I cry and cry and cry. And I make dua to Allah, Ya Allah, what do I do? Shaitan is walking all over me. No matter how much I want to try to leave the sin, I can't. So then he looks at me and he had tears in his eyes. He was a man with kids. He looked at me and said, Sheikh, what do I do? Shaitan has me by the neck. And every time I say I'm never going to do it again, he comes and he hits me and I commit the sin again. I commit the sin again. And he comes and hits me and I commit the sin again. So at that point I said to him, look, there's one thing to be proud over, at least you have nafsul lawwama, which means you still have the regretful and remorseful soul. Because as long as you have that, there is hope. But if there's no regret or there's no remorse, then how do you ever come out of it? Now, I'm not going to discuss any further how that case went and what advice I gave because that's not relevant to our discussion. The third level of the nafs is called nafsul mutma'inna. Nafsul mutma'inna is that inner self of the human being that encourages you to do good. So when you think of recreation, when you think of free time, when you think of enjoying yourself, you think of good things. When I was in madrasa in the UK, I remember it was holiday, so all the kids who were locally from the country, they had all gone home. Only those students were in the Islamic Institute who were foreigners. So those guys who were from out of the country, they were all there. So we used to all play basketball or soccer, or whatever it was in England, we used to play a lot of soccer. So one day I realized that one of my friends who was from Canada, he wasn't there. So I searched around, I thought maybe he might be sleeping, and I know he'd love to play soccer, so let me go call him. So I went to search for him, I couldn't find the guy. And then as I searched around, I found him in the masjid praying salah. So I went to him and I said, Sheikh, he wasn't a sheikh, we were kids. I said, why were you praying salah? Why don't you go outside and enjoy it? He said, the joy you guys have in playing basketball and soccer, that's the joy I find in praying salah. And that was the first time in my life I had met a 12-year-old kid who actually said that his joy was in praying salah. And I don't think I've met anyone since that day again, by the way. I think that was like the one guy, and that was it. I mean, the guy, his saying that, he taught me two lessons. The first was that, the second one was once I was praying Dhuhr Salah next to him, and we were in ruku' and he was crying. So after Salah was over, I thought maybe somebody bullied him and he was crying in Salah. So I said, is everything okay? If you have any issues, let me know. We'll get some guys together, we'll beat that guy up. So he says to me, what are you talking about? I said, why were you crying? I saw you crying in Salah. He said, I was crying in Salah because Allah gave me the honor to do ruku' in front of him. How old is this kid? 12. I was 12 years old too. We were both in the same class. And I looked at him and I said, what? Dhuhr is a boring prayer. If you're crying Fajr, it makes sense. Isha, it makes sense. Maghrib, it makes sense. Tarawih prayer, 27 times, everyone cries. But Dhuhr? Who cries in Dhuhr Salah? And not only that, but this guy's crying in ruku. The period of ruku is 3 tasbeehs. Like, you don't even get the time, the momentum to build up the tears. This guy was in ruku and he's just crying. I can see the tears just falling down. And that's the day I realized that there are certain people who actually enjoy their salah. They actually really, when they go into ruku, when they're in sujood, they sit there and they cry and cry and cry. So that's that level of nasul mutma'inna, where your heart pushes you to worship Allah. When you turn on the radio, when music goes on, you think to yourself, and I'm not here to talk about music being halal haram, that's not my discussion. My discussion is of a higher standard. That when you turn that music on, you think to yourself that, why don't I just listen to the Quran? That'll make my heart feel better. Why don't I just sit down and read the Quran? How about I watch something that will enhance me spiritually? Where your heart wants you to do good and it pushes you to do good. That's where we need to walk ourselves towards. This is where we need to go together as a community, as a group of young men and women. We need to learn to develop ourselves. Right? Umar radiallahu anhu, when he talks about it, that narration I started off, let's come back there, okay? Umar radiallahu anhu, when he talks about his life, he said that I was a person who was nothing and I became something. And that transition between nothing and something, it pivoted around my meeting with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the moment I fell in love with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is when my life changed. You have to realize that every person in this room right here is going to live a life, inshallah. Right? Allah knows what your lifespan is. I don't know what my lifespan is. You don't know what yours is. But so far, we've lived a life and we will continue to live, inshallah. And let's say, hypothetically, we were all to live at the age of 60. Let's say we all were to live till 60. Every person in this room. Let me ask you a question. Will we all be the same in the rights of Allah? It's the reality. Look at the person next to you and ask yourself this question. Will that person be ahead of me? Will I be ahead of them? It's a very serious question. Very, very serious question. You guys are all sitting here right now. Trust me, out of this room, there are going to be some gems who will do something. And they're going to do great things. But then there are certain people in this room, and I may be one of those people too, I don't know what my future is, who may not do much with their lives. You know, when I look at myself, sometimes I think to myself that there's so much more I could do, but I'm not doing it. Maybe there's something that's in my life that I need to get rid of. So every person sitting here, you need to ask yourself. You know, I was young, and I'll share with you guys a story. It was a Sunday, and on Sunday we used to have holiday in the madrasa, so it was a boarding school. So there was this place not too far away, there was a spring there. Our school was actually in the mountains. And there was a spring there, so we went to, it was a natural spring, we went to the spring. We had a good day there, we had, we prayed salah there, we just chilled there, we had a water fight, and blah, blah, blah. At the end of it, we had to get back to the madrasa by Asr prayer, because after Asr salah, they used to be in attendance. And after the attendance would be class, and if you missed that attendance, you'd be in trouble on Monday. So we all started rushing back because we got late. We didn't realize where time went, and we started running back. And while we were running back to the madrasa, everyone got their snack bags or whatever we had, and we were running to the mountains to get back to the madrasa on time. And when I was young, my friends used to call me laddu. You know what a laddu is? A laddu is a greasy dessert, round. The thing about a laddu is that it's very round. It has infinite corners. So when I was young, my friends used to call me laddus because when I was short, I used to be very, very round. Right? This is why I probably ended up doing jiu-jitsu, because I was bullied a lot when I was a kid. Thank you. I'd love to see those guys again. Anyway, so now when we were all running back, being someone who meets the description of a laddu, what's going to happen? I'm going to get tired. I remember my breath picked up, and they were all going ahead. And I said, "Guys, wait for me, wait for me." And they said, "We're going to miss attendance, so we're not waiting for anyone. You make it in time, you're good. Otherwise, you're on your own." And I kid you not, they kind of ran on ahead, until the point where I couldn't run anymore, and I was actually winded. Like I felt that pain right in my gut. So I stopped, and I bent over, and I was holding that in my stomach. And then I looked up again, and they were gone. And I must have been no more than 14 years at that time, and I had one of the most powerful reflections of my life. One of the most powerful reflections I had in my life was when I was 14 years old. I was holding my stomach and I stood up and I said, "Ya Allah, today the people who I call my friends, who I spent the whole day with running and having fun and playing and getting picnic together, they left me behind because they thought that they needed to look after themselves. Everyone was nafsi, nafsi. They were worried about themselves and that so they ran off. And today I'm standing here all alone, left behind. What if the same thing happens on the day of judgment? That I'm standing there with all my friends, And I was so caught into just believing that they were my friends and I was their friend without realizing that yes, they were my friends, but in their private life they were developing themselves. You guys understand that? It wasn't my fault, it wasn't their fault they were healthier than me. That's not my fault or their fault. They did something good, I didn't do it. That's my fault was that I should have developed myself. So the question that comes in this room is that when we stand in front of Allah on the day of judgment, who is ahead and who's behind? And when we graduate from here, who's ahead and who's behind? This next time we have a lecture series, I'm almost sure not all of you will be sitting here. There are some of you who will be sitting here, and there will be some of you who won't be here. So who goes ahead and who stays behind? That's a very important question we have to address. And it comes down to that narration of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, where he's talking about how he was behind, and then he didn't only run in that race, he flew in that race. Umar radiallahu anhu flies, and he goes ahead of all the companions. You know, he becomes the closest person to the Prophet ﷺ, because he was a man whose actions and his words and his heart were all in line. Three things. What were the three things? His qawl, his niyyah, and his amal. His intentions, his statements, and his actions, they were all in line. My teacher used to say that that's the way you should always be. The idea of sidq, truthfulness, is when your words, your actions, and your heart actually all line up together. When you can line them all up together, that's when you have sidq. And Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu became this person who was so truthful, he was so real. He wasn't fake. He really went all out for the sake of Allah and Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, until now he's so close to the Prophet that one day the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam enters into the masjid. The Sahabi says we were all waiting for prayer, and we were waiting for the Prophet's arrival. The Sahaba used to wait in the masjid until the Prophet came for salah. So they were all waiting for the Prophet's arrival. When the door opened and the Prophet entered the masjid, in his right hand, he was holding the hand of Abu Bakr. And in the left hand, he was holding the hand of Umar. And the three of them walked into the masjid together, and as they walked in, the Sahaba, they said that they looked so beautiful. Each and every one of us desired that only if we were holding either hand. But it was those two. And the Prophet held their hands and said, we will live like this, we will die like this, and we will be resurrected like this. Abu Bakr and Umar. And it's such a truthful statement. Even after the Prophet passes away, when Abu Bakr dies, where is he buried? Right next to the Prophet. And when Umar dies, where is he buried? Right next to him. Anyone else? No one else made the cut. There's only two people. And that's why I said if it was anyone other than Umar who said that statement, that there is no one between myself and Allah, we would have doubted that. But when it comes to a man like Umar, we realize that he wasn't exaggerating, he was just speaking the truth. So Umar radiallahu anhu, when we look at his life, we realize that he realized his purpose in life when he met the Prophet ﷺ. My teacher used to always say something that your life starts when you realize who you are. That's when your life actually starts. When you realize what your purpose in life is. For some people, their life starts earlier. Men like Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi alayhi, who were scholars of hadith at the age of 8. Can you imagine this? Young kid, Imam Shafi'i, young kid. And he's already teaching hadith to some seniors in the community, until the point where there's a narration that one day when Imam Shafi'i was teaching hadith, he was maybe 8 or 10 years old. There was a bird that came, and the bird set was right in front of him. So Imam Shafi'i was a kid. He took his cap off, and he threw it over the bird. He caught the bird. So, and then he took the bird, he caught it, and he brought it close to his heart, and he started playing with it. Brought it close to his chest, started petting it, and then he let it go, and started teaching him. Now all the adults that are sitting there, what are they thinking? Grow up. And come on, you're teaching hadith, act like an adult now. So they said this to Imam Shafi'i. Some of them said, Imam Shafi'i, they said, Muhammad, this is not right. You're a sheikh now, you teach hadith. You're playing with birds like this. So Imam Shafi'i said, okay, John. He started teaching hadith again. He was teaching. Then he said to them, قال رسول الله. He was teaching them hadith. He said, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الصبي الصبي ولو كان ابن نبي. He said, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a kid is a kid, even if he's a prophet's son. And they looked at him and they realized that he was teaching them all the lesson. Let the kid be a kid, right? This man, he realized his purpose earlier on in life. When you look at Imam Shafi'i's life, it amazes you. Imam Shafi'i, rahmatullahi alayhi, he studied by Imam Malik directly. You know Imam Malik, rahmatullahi alayhi? for those of you who are aware of the 4 different schools of thoughts, what are they? No, name them chronologically. Who came first and who came last? Which one is the first one? Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, the Hanafi fiqh was the first fiqh compiled. Okay, the Hanafi. The second one was the Maliki. The third was the Shafi'i. The fourth was the Hanbali. Okay, the first was the Hanafi. So Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi alayhi, have you guys ever heard of that discussion? Have you guys ever heard of the debate of Imam Hanifa and Imam Shafi'i? Have you guys ever read it? Famous debate between have you guys heard about that debate that Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Shafi'i met and they had a huge debate? If anyone ever tells you that, they're lying to you. Because it was impossible for both of them to ever meet. The year Imam Abu Hanifa passed away was the year Imam Shafi'i was born. Okay? So if anyone ever tells you, one day Imam Abu Hanifa, he got into a huge debate with Imam Shafi'i, what do you say? Okay, save it. That doesn't make any sense. Because Imam Abu Hanifa passed away in year 150 after Hijrah. 150 years after migration, and that was the same year Imam Shafi'i was born. That's why the historians, they say, the sun set on one side and it rose on the other side. The balance came. One giant left, the other giant comes. Right? However, Imam Abu Hanifa definitely did meet Imam Malik on multiple occasions. He met Imam Malik. Imam Hanifa came to Medina Munawwara, and when Imam Malik was teaching hadith, he saw Imam Hanifa was in the gathering. And he stopped. Now, for those of you who are aware of Imam Malik, do you have anyone here who follows the Maliki fiqh? No one? No one? Wow, we need some converts. Or we need one of you guys to convert to the Maliki fiqh too. Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi was a giant. He was a teacher of hadith that everyone in the world respected. Everyone respected Imam Malik. You know, I'll tell you guys something that's factual. Imam Malik wrote a book called the Muwatta. What is it called? Muwatta. The Muwatta of Imam Malik factually is more authentic than Bukhari. You guys know that? When everyone talks about the most authentic book, what's the only name that comes to our mind? Imam Malik's Muwatta is factual. It's a fact, by the way. It's not a theory. It's a fact. Is more authentic than Bukhari. But then the question is, why is it not called the most authentic book? Why is it that Bukhari is called the most authentic book? First, let me prove why I said it's a fact. Then after that, I'll come to the explanation. Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi, in his Sahih al-Bukhari, his compilation of 6,500 some hadith. How many hadith does he have? 6,000, 7,000, 6,500 some. He has 23 narrations that he calls the golden narrations. How many of them? Golden narrations. He calls them the golden narrations. What are the golden narrations? The golden narrations are Imam Bukhari narrates from someone, who narrates from someone, who narrates from someone, who narrates from the Prophet. So between Bukhari and the Prophet, how many people are there? 3. He calls these golden narrations thulathiyat. Thulathiyat means 3 narrations. Between myself and the Prophet are 3. Imam Bukhari only had 23. Okay? Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi studied with Sahaba. And he studied with Tabi'i, those successors. So most 90% of Imam Malik's Muwatta is Imam Malik, 1 narrator, 2 narrators, and Prophet. So how many narrators between him and the Prophet? 2. And both of these generations were vouched by the Prophet. I vouch for my generation, the Sahaba, and the generation that follows after. Imam Malik's book is definitely one of the most authentic books on the face of the earth. Now the question is, but why is it not as respected, or not respected, or as renowned as Sahih Bukhari? Is that a good question? Yes or no? Very good question. So the answer to that is, because Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, in his collection of hadith, he had a lot of his own commentary and his own words. As for Sahih Bukhari, is only hadith. It's pure hadith. There's no Bukhari statements in there, or his words, or his opinions. It's just hadith, 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 hadith. You guys understand? It's non-stop hadith. While for Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, he quotes a hadith, he gives commentary. He quotes a hadith, gives an explanation. Quotes some scholars. So it's not like a pure, if you want to say, collection of hadith, even though it is, but just for your understanding, I use the word pure. Now, Imam Hanifa did meet Imam Malik. And just so you understand this meeting, it's very important for you to know who Imam Malik was. Imam Malik was a scholar who everyone in the world used to respect. Even the Khalifas of the time used to respect him. The Khalifa said to him that I will take your fiqh and make it the universal fiqh for every Muslim on the face of the earth. Imam Malik said no. Anyone follows another opinion that, they should follow that opinion. Imam Malik was a person that was also feared. He wished to fear him because he was very proper. I'm going to use a word which doesn't really describe Imam Malik, but it'll help you understand the image that I'm trying to build here. He was like a don. When Imam Malik showed up, everyone went, shh. No one would look at him. No one would stand up. Everyone picked up silence. There was a student of Imam Malik, who was from Spain. His name was Yahya bin Yahya al-Undulusi. What was his name? Yahya bin Yahya al-Undulusi. Undulus was the Islamic Spain. He traveled all the way from Spain to study by Imam Malik in Medina. He comes to Medina. Imam Malik is giving the lesson in the masjid. He's watching from outside. Imam Malik, when he used to teach hadith, you know what he used to say? He used to say, I narrate from so-and-so, who narrates from so-and-so sahabi, and that sahabi says, you know how we said, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said? That's how we narrate hadith, right? The Prophet said, the Prophet said, the Prophet said. Imam Malik didn't say the Prophet said. He would rarely say that. Every time he would narrate hadith, he would say, Qala sahibu hadha al-qabr sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The one lying in this grave said. Because he used to teach in the Prophet's mosque. Every narration he used to say, Qala sahibu hadha al-qabr. Qala sahibu hadha al-qabr. The one in this grave he said. The one in the grave said. So Yahya bin Yahya came from outside, he was watching, and Imam Malik's giving this class and everyone's there. He waited, he sat for a little bit, he listened to hadith. After Asr time, Imam Malik used to sit down on his nice cushion. And all the people of the community that wanted to meet him, they used to line up and come and ask him questions. So now this Spaniard, he stood in line waiting for his turn. He came to the front, his turn came. Imam Malik said, yes, what do you want? He said, I've come from Spain. Imam Malik said, good job, what do you want? He said, I want to study hadith. Imam Malik said, come in the morning, I teach hadith, you can join the gathering. He said, no, I want to study hadith one-on-one with you. Imam Malik looks at this guy like, what? Like, this guy's got guts. He's saying, I want to study hadith one-on-one with you. Imam Malik said, well, that's not going to happen. Come in the morning. He said, no, I came from Spain and you have to teach me one-on-one. So Imam Malik looked to the side, he had some students there, he made a head gesture, take care of this guy. 4 guys came, they picked him up and they tossed him out of the masjid. They took him there and one of them got really angry, he pulled out a whip and started beating the guy. After he beat him up, Yahya bin Yahya, you know, European Westerners we're very stubborn people. You got him mad again. Right? His turn came, he came to the front. Imam Malik said, what do you want? He said to him, I just want you to know that I'm going to hold you accountable on the day of judgment. Imam Malik freaked out. What happened? He said, you told those guys to take me out. Had they just taken me out for me not abiding to the etiquette of your gathering, I would have been okay with that. But when they took me out, they beat me up. And that's not acceptable. Imam Malik said, what do you want? He said, they hit me 17 times, you must teach me 17 hadith. Imam Malik said, okay, let's do it. He'll have me 17 hadith. After that he said, are you happy now? Kafaita, are you happy? He said, no, I have one more request. He said, what's your request? He said, Zidni fil dhar, beat me up more. Zidni fil dhar, beat me up more and teach me more hadith. And that's when Imam Malik said, this kid's special. He said, tomorrow you come to my gathering, you sit at the front. You know the Muwatta of Imam Malik that we have till today? You know the famous Muwatta, if anyone's heard of that book, Imam Malik's book? The whole book is narrated by him. He's the narrator of that book. Anyone that reads Muwatta of Imam Malik, the reward goes to who? Yahya bin Yahya al-Undulus. That's why all the Spanish scholars, the Spaniard scholars, the Undulus scholars, which fiqh do they follow? Anyone know? Most of them are Maliki, right? This northern Africa. Well, which fiqh do most of them follow? They're all Maliki. You know, Mauritania, what do you call this? Jazair. What do you call Jazair in English? Algeria, and then next to that, Tunisia, right? All these countries, which fiqh do they follow? They're all Maliki. And Yahya bin Yahya al-Undulusi was one who took Maliki fiqh. Now anyway, let's come back to the point that I was saying. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi was a giant in Kufa in Iran. He was a person that was like a pillar there. He comes to Medina, he's heard a lot about Imam Malik. He enters the masjid, he sits at the back. One giant sitting at the back, the other giant is teaching his hadith. Imam Malik looks up and sees Imam Hanifa is there. He stops the class. Very rare. Imam Malik never stops the class. He gets up, he sits next to Imam Hanifa and says to him, you will teach the class today. Imam Hanifa, he sat at the front, he gave the dars. After giving the class, he left. Imam Hanifa, when he visited Medina, he spent very little time there. he wouldn't usually spend a lot of time in Medina. One of the reasons was because, according to him, and this is his own little personal thing, it wasn't a fatwa, it's not the Hanafi fiqh, it was just his personal opinion. He used to feel that using the washroom in the boundaries of Medina was a disrespect to the city of the Prophet. So he wouldn't spend much time there. He would usually, visit for a few days and then he would leave after that. Now, after Imam Hanifa left, Imam Malik came back and he sat down. And his student said to him, this is the first time you gave your seat to someone else. Who was that guy? So Imam Malik said, he was a guy that if he said to you, this pillar is made of gold, and you were there the day that pillar was made, and you saw with your eye that it was made of cement. You were there that day, the pillar was being made, and you saw with your eyes it was being made of cement. But if he believes it was made of gold, if he says that, he'll give you 101 proofs to prove to you that it's made of gold. But he's a man who can give proof after proof after proof after proof. So Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi, Imam Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi. Imam Shafi'i studied by Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi. He did. He studied the whole Muwatta by him. Not only that, Imam Shafi'i also studied by Imam Hanifa's student Imam Muhammad. Imam Muhammad ibn Hussain al-Shaybani, Imam Shafi'i had studied by him. Now, why did I talk about Imam Shafi'i? The reason, I'll explain to you why. I said to you that my teacher used to say, a person's life starts when they realize who they actually are. That's when your life actually starts. Imam Shafi'i, look at him. He's teaching hadith at a young age. He studies by a Maliki scholar all the way in Medina. That's usually a lifetime journey. After that, he goes to Kufa and studies with Imam Muhammad ibn Hussain al-Shaybani. After that, he comes back home, he develops the fiqh. Who's Shafi'i here? You raise your hand. May I have 1, 2, 3. Okay? Anyone who's Shafi'i, 4. MashaAllah. Go on, you guys will raise your hand to us. Give us some support. Right? Imam Shafi'i, look at the barakah in his life. Allahu Akbar. He prepared the whole Shafi'i fiqh. Where was he from? Anyone know? Where was he born? Allah. Gaza. Where was he born? He was born in Gaza. Imam Shafi'i, he went back home. He prepared the whole Shafi'i fiqh. After that, he traveled, and what's one of the bordering cities of Gaza? Egypt. He moved to Egypt. When he came to Egypt, what did Imam Shafi'i do? Anyone know? He redid the whole fiqh all over again. Can you imagine that? He prepared a whole fiqh in Gaza. He then comes to Egypt, and then he says, no, it doesn't make sense. All the things I said, some of them don't make sense, some of them do make sense. There's a different context, different culture, different narrations. Let's do it all over again. So this is called the Shafi'i Qadim Madhab and the Jadid Madhab. The newer opinion of Imam Shafi'i and the older opinion. If you ever see with a Shafi'i scholar, he'll always say this. Imam Shafi'i in his older opinion, Imam Shafi'i in his newer opinion. When we look at this man's life, and I can sit here and talk about him, and talk about him, and talk about him, what amazes me most is that how he accomplished so much, and he accomplished so much in his life because he realized his purpose in life earlier on in life. There are some people who realize their worth earlier in life. And then there are some people who realize their worth later on in life. And every year that passes by while you don't realize your identity, your worth, who you actually are, is a wasted year. It's a year that you could have maximized on, but you let that year slip past your hand. Some people in this room may actually realize who they are and what their purpose is in life, and that Bollywood, Hollywood, and TV shows are not everything. Partying is not everything. People as they mature, they realize their value. If you meet someone before they got married and after they got married, is there a difference in that person? Yes or no? You have friends, you have relatives, of course, right? Someone before they get married, a lot of the young guys and girls are very, very hyper, very immature. When you get married and you have kids, one thing you're going to want to do is read your Facebook pre-marriage dates. And you're going to read your post and say, Ya Allah, who's this jungly Janwar Haywan? So immature. As you get older, for those of you who are older and married, am I right or wrong? For those of you who are older, you'll know. Anyone who's over post 25, you realize that when you look at yourself when you're 18, you're like, man, I can't believe I thought thug life was cool. And I can't believe I actually wanted to make all those hand gestures. That's weird. When you look, I'm telling you, and if you don't realize it now, you're going to realize it up ahead. As you advance in life, when you look back, and you're going to realize that there was so much of my life I could have used had I not wasted it. And as you get older, you mature. When you have kids, when you get older, and then you need to settle down. Unfortunately, some people just don't mature. I want to make that clear as well, okay? Some people, they get very far. I've dealt with marriage cases where the wives are complaining that even after that they have 2, 3 kids, that the guy is addicted to video games. And I say, yeah, Allah, what's wrong with you, brother? And not only guys, it's also an issue with, I'm not kidding you, I have a Facebook account. And at least once a week I get invited, even now, to Candy Crush. Candy Crush is old school, right? I mean, it should be like ancient, it's gone now. But even now I get invited to that game. And by the way, I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't download that game once or twice, right? It's such a foolish game, honestly. It doesn't even increase you intellectually. If there's a game that increases you intellectually, it makes you smarter, and that's another thing. You play that game because it makes you smarter. You observe and you can develop skills. But Candy Crush, those game. So even we have mothers who have kids, and their kids are crying while mother's playing video game, right? Kids are crying, mom is still on Facebook. Kids are crying, dad is still on Facebook, he's still on Twitter, he's still on Instagram. So there's no concern of what's happening around you because you're still immature. You have to learn to mature, my friends. And a part of that maturity is that you'll be able to see between fluff and substance. And as you mature and as your eyes begin to open up and you begin to see the haqa'iq, the realities of life, you'll realize that a lot of what is glorified today is all fluff. Do you understand? This obsession with culture, with pop culture, this obsession with entertainment, the obsession with partying, this dream that if I become that person, I will succeed in life. You'll realize as you mature that a lot of this is all fluff and has no reality. And the external beauty of a person can only attract you to a degree. At the end of it, it all comes down to the internal maturity of a person. You know, how mature a person actually is. When I sit with someone and they ask me a good question, a smile comes to my face. I was at a Hajj seminar on Saturday, and I was eating lunch, and one of my good buddies said, "Sheikh, you're smiling." Like, I do smile anyway, but I was very happy. He said, "Why are you happy? You've been smiling, you look so happy. We've been eating, during the whole lunch break." I said, "Today someone asked me a very good question." And when I heard that question, I felt so happy. Like, there are people, most of the people, they ask silly questions. Like, it's all repetitive. There's no research, no thought. What's the ruling on music? Well, what's the ruling on growing a beard? I'm not saying your questions are bad. Every question is a good question. But when someone asks me a very good question, I think, wow, that's a very good question. I can share some examples with you of some of the questions that I was asked, and I thought to myself, that's a very good question right there. You really amazed me. I never thought that a person could ask a question like this. The Prophet ﷺ said, وَحُسْنُ السُّؤَالِ نِصْفُ الْعِلْمِ. حُسْنُ السُّؤَالِ نِصْفُ الْعِلْمِ. A good question is half of knowledge. Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi alayhi, someone asked him a question. He asked him for the proof of ijma'. I'm not going to talk about what ijma' is, it's too detailed. He said to him, "What's ijma'?" Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi alayhi said, he gave the answer to the guy the next day, and he said to him, "I want you to know that last night I read the Quran 3 times to find the proof for it." How many times? I read it 3 times, and at the 3rd time, I found the ayah giving us proof for ijma'. I mean, good question, pushes the person. Someone asked Imam Muslim rahmatullahi alayhi. Imam Muslim, you guys have all heard of Sahih Muslim? Yes? Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj. Imam Muslim rahmatullahi alayhi was giving a lecture, and during the lecture someone asked him, "Sheikh, what's the reference for so-and-so hadith?" Imam Muslim got stuck. Oh my God, let's answer this. Now Imam Muslim was as good as his teacher was. Who was his teacher? Yes, Imam Bukhari, you just flew that, right? Did you know that or you just flew to it? You knew it. Okay, a lot of guys just flew it. They just hit it. Who was another one of Imam Bukhari's famous students? He had 2 very famous students. Imam Muslim was one. The other was Imam Tirmidhi. You guys have heard it's one of the 6 authentic collections. Imam Tirmidhi was the second. Very famous students. So Imam Muslim was giving the lecture. Someone asked him, "What's the reference for this hadith?" He thought to himself, "Man, I don't know." So he said, "Okay, I'll answer you tomorrow." He came back home. He told his wife that, "I'm not going to sleep until I find the answer." And his wife knew that he wasn't joking. When he was stuck on something, he was going to do it. So he went into his room where all the books were. He started sitting there and learning, studying. His wife said, "You know what? You're going to be here all night." And he said he wasn't going to join her in the wheel until they found the hadith. She put a basket of dates in front of him. She said, "I'll be in the room. Come and join me when you're done. Maybe you can speak." So Imam Muslim was searching for the hadith. And when you're caught in your mind and you're really searching for something, you begin to eat and drink. You guys notice that? You just start, there's a word for it too. When you're driving, you just keep munching. So he just started munching on the dates. He had an overdose of dates, and Imam Muslim died. He died that day. Literally, that's what happened. Imam Muslim died by overeating dates. I don't know how that happens, but he's an example. My teacher used to say, "Maulvi kabhi bhook se nahi marta hai, zyada kha kar marta hai." That a scholar doesn't die of hunger. He can die by overeating, though. Imam Muslim is a proof of that. Right? He died by overeating, right? When a person asks a good question, you think to yourself, "SubhanAllah, what a good question." And as you grow, right, depending on the people you have around you, depending upon the exposure, the material you read, the people you sit with, you're also going to grow. You know, you sit with people that are immature, you will become immature. You'll remain immature for a long time. But if you sit with people that are older than you, people that are more mature than you, as a young person, you will be able to reach maturity a lot faster. And as you reach that maturity, one thing that you'll realize, and the more mature a person gets to realize, is that the Quran is the haqq and the deen is the most important thing in your life. Have you guys realized that your grandparents become very religious? Right? You look back at their lives when they were younger, were they religious? Probably not. When they got older, when people get older, what's one thing that usually happens in their lives? They get more religious. Have you guys noticed that? When people get older, they get religious. You ever ask yourself why? It's because they're maturing. And as they're maturing, they begin to realize that all these other things are all actually distractions. I need to be focused. And the sooner you people in this gathering, my brothers and sisters sitting in this gathering, the sooner you can mature and learn to see between desires and reality, between this fluff and reality, between what's being promoted in this entertainment world and in this materialistic world and reality, the sooner you can see through it, the sooner you will establish yourself. How much time do we have left? Are we over time? We are, right? Can we go for another 5 minutes? Are you guys okay with that? Yeah, 5 more minutes. 10. What was that? No Q&A. Okay, we'll do the Q&A. What was that? Yeah, asking a good question. Now I'm going to hold you to that. Okay, asking a good question. Okay. Well, see, the good question is based off. See, here's the thing. A good question is a tricky thing. Because from my perspective as an answerer, I consider a good question based off how challenging that question is to me. But a good question could be different from you because that's based off the limits of your knowledge. So someone who may know a little, they may ask you, how do I read Surah Fatiha? For that person, that could be a very good question. So there's no, I don't want you guys to feel like, pressure when it comes to the Q&A session. Yes, I was talking about materialism. That was the last word that I used, and I wanted to talk a little about materialism in today's lecture before I enter this class. That was one of the things that I about materialism. See, in the world that we live in, we are drowning in materialism. And it's this lack of seeing the reality that is killing us spiritually. And this is what keeps us at bay from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, drowning and being overly influenced by materialism. I want you to keep that thought in your mind. Can you guys do that for me? I'm going to jump over here, then I'm going to come back, okay? Have you guys noticed that atheism is very common in the West? Yes or no? Very common, right? Any YouTube video, you go on there, even if it's about Lady Gaga, at some point some atheist has to come in there. Something has to come about religion, and man, God is evil, stuff like that, right? It always has to come up. Like, someone said to me, Sheikh, why don't do you know of your own YouTube videos that are up there? I said, no. I said, why not? I said, the thing I have on YouTube is that whenever I go there, and if I read the comments, it hurts me too much. So you know what? I've given YouTube 3 talaqs. 3 talaqs. No, religious material on YouTube. If it's not religious, if it's just like, some kind of silly thing, that's not an issue because usually you don't have those people there. When I look at, in particular, I'm giving comments 3 talaqs. I won't go anywhere near the comment section. You realize that atheism is very common. Now, is atheism as common in the East? It's getting more common now, but was it as common 10 years ago? Now, I'll give you an example, okay? You come to a kid who's in high school, or even someone who's sitting here possibly, and say to him, God doesn't exist. There's a scientific explanation to everything in life. What happens to that young guy or girl? Very intrigued. Ooh, tell me more. That sounds so cool. I've never heard of this before. Yes or no? You get it. Now you go to a kid, maybe in Egypt or Africa or India, Bombay, you go to a kid there and say, you know what? God doesn't exist, but there's a scientific explanation for everything. He's going to say, bye, that's not happening. Brother, get out of here. Go to something else more productive. Trust me, it's not going to work. I'm not interested. Say, no, but there's an intellectual. Please, man, just go to something else, man. I'm a little busy right now. I got other things to do. I don't want to hear your story. You ask yourself, why is it that atheism is so common in the West and has little influence or is growing in the East now and it wasn't there before or was there very little before? Is that a good question? Yes or no? It is, right? Now let's address it. Atheism, what does that mean? Theism, what does theism mean? First understand that. Not religion. Theism means belief in God. To believe in God is what we call theism. Atheism means the absence of belief in God. Someone who believes in one God, we call them monotheists. Someone who believes in multiple gods, polytheists. Okay? Pay attention. People are identified by what they are not identified by what they're not. Confusing? You guys understand that? I'll explain to you an example, okay? When you identify me after the lecture's over, for those of you who don't remember my name, you're going to say, that tall guy was very boring. Okay? You're not going to say, the guy who wasn't short was very boring. You identify people by what they are. You don't identify them by what they're not. You guys understand that? So I won't say, the person who's not a sister. I'm going to say, the guy. You guys agree with me? So a Buddhist follows Buddhism. A Christian, Christianity. You know, a Jew, Judaism. You guys follow me here? Okay. A Muslim, Islam. Atheism is the exception. It's the only people who are identified by what they're not. Interesting? You guys understand what I'm saying? It's not right. They don't deserve to be called atheists. That's my whole big matter. Because when you hide behind what you're not, people don't realize what you are. And if they don't know what you are, they don't know how to fight you. They're off guard. If I call myself a Muslim, as soon as I say Islam, you know everything about me, you know what you like, you know what you don't like. But if I say I'm not a Muslim, now you're confused, what are you? Which angle is he going to take when he's coming at me? So when you say atheism, now as a subject, I'm thinking, which angle is this person going to attack me from? I don't know. From this angle, that angle. So it's important to understand an atheist. An atheist in reality is a materialist. They don't deserve to be called atheists. They should actually be called materialists because they believe in the material world and they don't believe in the unseen world. So now I'm going to share something with you guys. Pay attention. To an atheist, God is a philosophy and the world around him is a reality. You guys understand that? God is a... So what is God? You have your perspective, I have my perspective. Maybe he exists, maybe he doesn't exist. But the world around me is a reality. This bottle is a reality. This laptop is a reality. It's worth living and dying for. The house is a reality. The car is a reality. These things are all realities. So these things are things that I can strive for, sacrifice for, and live and die for them. But God is a philosophy. I don't know if he exists or not, or what his interpretation is, what he actually means. So that's not worth something living and dying for. You guys understand that? So an atheist believes God is a philosophy and the world around him is a reality, while we as theists, or in particular Muslims, believe God is a reality and the world around us is a philosophy. It's a flip. So when we look at God, Allah, we know Allah is al-haq. What is one of his attributes? Al-haq. The haq means the truth, the reality. Allah is a reality. The world around me is a philosophy. Should I go after this phone or not? Well, if it's going to take me closer to Allah, it's worth it. Otherwise, it's not worth it. You guys understand that? So I don't base this off its material human value. I base it off its spiritual value. Is this phone worth $500? Yes or no? It's not good. Getting ripped off. I'm wanting someone to tell me that. Is this phone worth $500? Is this laptop worth $2,000? Please say yes. I gotta have $2,000. I'm sad if I don't say that. Okay? Yes or no? This is an exercise I want you guys to go through. Is this phone worth $500? Those who say yes, raise your hand. Those who say yes, raise your hand. Yes? $500. Guys, pay attention. We worked so far. It's working. Okay? Is this phone worth $500? Raise your hand, yes. Raise your hand, no. Wow, I didn't even raise. Okay? But when you said yes, why? Why is it worth $500? See, that's an interesting argument, right? It looks like my phone and my phone is worth $500. Wow, that's a very interesting argument. I've never had an interesting argument like that before. It's a very interesting argument. You guys understand why it's so interesting? Because you're basing the value of others off of your own. That's so intriguing. Wow. SubhanAllah. Okay. It's very deceitful too. But anyway, okay. Anyone else who said yes, raise your hand. Yes. Why is it worth 500?
It's a new phone.
It's a new phone. It's got a nice camera. Probably has some very good, something very fancy semantic that makes it worth 500. Those who said it's not worth 500, raise your hands. Let me find some. Yes, brother at the back with the watcher. People still wear watches. Yeah, I'm assuming you're the only guy here. Go ahead. Why is it not worth 500?
Because the value pretty much is based on what other people will pay for it, but not, like in reality it has
In reality, it has a unique value. You're getting very philosophical. Why? I like it. Keep going.
the value that
It's kind of like the sophistaya. We used to say that in reality we don't exist. This is all a dream. This is the thing. This is an argument, right? We call them sophists, right? They'll say that we don't exist. You and I are actually not here right now. We're just seeing each other, but we're not here. So that's why the books of Aqidah, Imam Nasafi rahmatullahi alayhi, the first line he writes in his Aqidah book is حَقَائِقُ الْأَشْيَاءِ ثَابِتَةٌ. We're all real. No, stop it. Okay. Anyone else want to give it a try? Why is it not worth 500? Now look, the answer of a materialist would be, it is worth 500. Okay? The reason is because, no, that wasn't your perspective. Your perspective was different. But a materialist would technically say yes or no. Yes, they would say because they would look at the pros and cons of it, and they would say, well, according to the market value, it is 500. And someone else may come and look at it and say, no, it's damaged, secondhand, not worth 500. From a spiritual standpoint, and this is what I want you guys to look at, from a theist standpoint, when we look at anything, whether it's a phone, laptop, or anything, if someone asks you, is it worth it? Your spiritual answer will be, it depends. What's your answer? It depends on what? What do you use it for? If I use this phone to look at haram, then is this worth it? If I use this phone to speak with someone that's not allowed to speak to haram conversation, or text haram conversation, then this phone is not worth 500. This phone is taking me to Jahannam. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, any object that was new that he would bring into his life, he would make a very important dua. You should all make this dua too. Anytime you buy a new phone, new car, new shoes, new scarf, anything that you get that's a part of your life that's new, read this dua. Allahumma inni as'aluka khayrahu wa khayra ma sun'ala. Wa a'udhu bika min sharrihi wa sharri ma sun'ala. The English translation, if you don't know the Arabic, write it down. The English is, Oh Allah, I ask you the good of it and whatever good it was made for. And Oh Allah, I ask you to save me from the evil of it and whatever evil it was made for. And then after that, my teacher should always say, read Ayatul Kursi before it. So that way, Shaitan cannot use that to attack you or to deceive you. Okay? So that's what it depends on. It all comes down to what is the usage of this item. Therefore, we can determine the value of it. So it's important for us to realize that the attack of the West, or the attack on our identity, and I don't want to use the West as being negative, but it's a cultural, it is a greater part of the culture, it really weighs in a lot, is materialism. We have to learn to move away from materialism. We have to learn to see things for their reality. We have to learn to interact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Now when I'm talking about some of these things are probably very high. You guys are what's he talking about? Interact with Allah, what does that actually mean? I'm going to give you one example of this idea. Okay? Because this is a solution. Learn to interact with Allah. Learn to mature. Learn to use these eyes and these limbs and these senses of yours to see beyond the obvious. Everyone can see one thing, you should see something different. What does that mean? Okay. Average kid in America, he's hungry, goes to McDonald's, right? Zabiha halal McDonald's. Those of you are going to say, why is this a McDonald's example, right? I've been trolled on Zabiha halal so much in the past 2 weeks. Honestly. Don't get involved. Creekstone. Don't even say that word. I'm going to my most hated word, Creekstone. Okay? My teacher told me, Hussain, there are 2 things in your life, don't get involved with them because people will kill you. Halal and hilal. Halal Meat issues, hilal means the moon issues. So these are two things that the communities are going to fight over until the day of judgment. Halal and hilal. I made a mistake. I won't get involved with hilal in my life, for sure. That's one mistake. Now, come back to the original example. A person, a young man in the West, young girl in the West, she's hungry, he's hungry, they go to a restaurant and place an order for some food. The sandwich comes, the person behind the counter says $10. Reaches in his pocket, pulls out $10, gives it, takes the food, and goes. Now, what was the key factor in that transaction? To this young man or young girl, in order to have that food, what do you have to have? $10. $10 food, no $10, no food. Simple, okay? Money, education. No money, no education. Money, marriage. No money, no marriage. Money. Some of you guys are laughing. That's why I came with it. Money, marriage. Okay? Money, car, no money, no car. Money, house, no money, no house. And you can take this all around, okay? So for us, the core of life is actually on a dollar sign. And because we interact with this reality, or this delusion, I say, every day we begin to believe that everything in the world has a dollar sign. And as long as I meet that dollar sign, I can live. And you continue to run and run and run, and you forget to realize the actual key component in that transaction. Let's look at this very same example from another angle. A kid somewhere in the East, let's say Bombay, I'll use Bombay because that's where I'm from, okay? Some kid in Bombay, he's really, really hungry, just like that American kid, okay? Goes to the store, orders his food, the guy behind the counter says 10 rupees. He reaches into his pockets, does he have 10 rupees? For this example, say he, no 10 rupees. The guy behind the counter, does he give him the food? No food, get out of here. The kid walks around, giving people hints that I'm hungry, can someone buy me some food, I haven't eaten for days, everyone ignores him. He tries and tries and tries. Evening comes in, he sits on the curb and says, Ya Allah, oh my Lord, whatever religion he follows. I'm very hungry right now. And I'm about to go to sleep. When I wake up, I want some food. Right? When he wakes up, when that food comes to him, whether it's an hour later, 10 minutes later, a day later, when he eats it, who does he attribute that food to? Allah. Every bite he takes, it increases him in iman. You know, you and I, when it comes to water, we just reach into the back, pull out a bottle. We turn on the tap, water. But this person has to travel miles to just pull out a cup of water from a well. So when he drinks that water, who does he attribute it to? Allah. When you and I are hot, we turn on the air conditioning, man-made, artificial. When he's hot, he raises his hand and he says, Ya Allah, I need some air. And the breeze comes and it brushes past him and he says, SubhanAllah. The breeze increases him in iman. When we're hot, we open up an umbrella. When he's hot, the cloud comes on top of him. Even the cloud increases him in iman. You guys understand what I'm saying? So when you interact with Allah's creation, you begin to appreciate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what Allah says, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا. Which one of the favors of your Lord will you deny? And the reason why this surah doesn't really hit home with us is because we don't interact with Allah's creation anymore. The closest interaction that we do with Allah's creation is maybe a portrait like that at the back which has some greenery on it. Or maybe some fake plant sitting on one of these tables that has some, that's the closest we interact with Allah's creation. So, we need to learn to break away from materialism. We need to learn to balance our life between materialism and reality. Learn to think for yourself. Don't let other people dictate life to you. And in particular, if those people are lost themselves, the best way for you to live your life is by revelation because it's divine and it's flawless. Some of the things today just won't make sense to you. You won't be able to come to terms with them. But that's the nature of revelation. And that's when revelation has its beauty that you don't understand it, yet you continue to submit to it. You don't want to act upon it, yet you're continuing to submit to it. You know? So that's what I want you guys to understand. You know, a part of your identity is developing internally. And we talked about the other external aspects last week. Today I want to talk about this internal aspect of developing identity. Pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us all the tawfiq and ability to act on what we said. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. Whatever, if you guys want no cards, we're going to ask questions, I don't give that.
Inshallah, we will have note cards, and if anyone has a question, just write down the note card, and that's it.
You can just raise your hand.
Or you can raise your hand, whichever one you feel.
how do you increase your relationship with Allah? What I'm talking about here is an inner dimension of the human mind, which is what we call reflection. Allah encourages reflection so regularly in the Quran. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَسْمَعُونَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَسْمَعُونَ. Again and again you find the Quran talking about this idea of reflection. So it could be reflection. Your spiritual development can happen by reflection in literally anything. Literally anything. You open the Quran, pick an ayah, and just reflect over it. What is this ayah actually saying? You understand? You look at, for those of you who are med students, right, or biology, taking biology classes, reflect over that. For those of you who are into architecture, reflect over that. For those of you who are, Loyola campus is such a beautiful campus. You sit at the lake shore and you ask yourself, Ya Allah, look how beautiful it is. Truly, there are infinite things that you can learn to reflect on. So one thing that I'll say for sure is that take out time to reflect every day. One of the most beautiful things to reflect on, though, while you're reflecting, is on the names and attributes of Allah. Look at them and see how they manifest themselves in the world around you. Ar-Rahman. There are books written on this, for example. Okay? Ar-Rahim, Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, Al-Awwal, Al-Akhir, Al-Zahir, Al-Batin, Al-Wali, Al-Ta'ali, Al-Barr. Go through the names of Allah, the attributes of Allah, and as you look at them, you ask yourself, how do I see these manifesting themselves in my life? Right? That's one way, but the other way is the other way around, where you look at Allah's creation and try to work backwards into Allah's attributes. One way or the other, along those ways. Okay, I'm going to take 3 more questions. I would love to sit here with you guys and take a lot of questions, but the thing is that I have some commitments, and today's lecture is kind of a little long, so. What is, sorry, what's it? Oh, before marriage. Okay, let's see if there's any other good questions that I'll come back to this if we have some. Yes. You can find the answer to this in like everywhere on the internet. And it's nothing that relates that's special to the context or the people. This is a very standardized answer that you can find everywhere. But if we have if time comes, I'll answer. But regarding why, what's the wisdom behind having 4 wives? Yes, go ahead.
I think everyone has this question last time, so sorry. So I'm going to phrase it not as well as he did, but I think it was along the lines of when we enter college and studying academics and stuff, how do we balance the scientific reasoning versus faith?
That's a good question. I like that question. Okay. So as you grow intellectually, I want you to think of it this way. When a person learns something, and when they're new at something, they think that they can find flaws in things that have existed for a long time. Does that make sense to you? It's a part of maturity. Okay, so for example, someone who just learned how to fight, that's the only thing they're going to talk about, I fight. But someone who's fought all their life, they don't want to talk about it anymore. Because they know what it actually means, and they don't have to go and gossip about it. Does that make sense? Similarly with someone who goes to the gym, if they just started, they're going to tell them about it. Someone who goes to the gym very regularly, do you see them talking about it every time that they go to the gym? People usually post things on social media that they do irregularly. Things they do regularly, they're not going to post it. Do you think someone from Chicago is going to check in Chicago? No. Someone from New York is going to check in I'm in Chicago. Someone from Chicago would check in that I'm in New York. But if you're from there, would you check in from there? You wouldn't check in from there. So when you keep that in mind, it's important to know that you've come into an environment of academia. And Western academics has a very interesting underlying philosophy, which is guilty until proven innocent. Does that make sense to you? Guilty until proven innocent. Which means everyone is open to questioning. Everyone and everything. Open the books up again. I don't care if you've proved it, but I have to prove it again. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when you take that mindset and you think of if you guilty until proven innocent, you become a pessimist. Okay? And everything around you becomes something that you want to challenge and you want to push. Now the Islamic philosophy is this. And we're not talking about who's right, who's wrong. That's not the point. I'm talking about the underlying thought process. The thought process is what you need to figure out. Okay? The issues are different. Forget those issues. Now, don't think about it. Think about the thought process. Think about living a life where I look at everyone as being guilty until proven innocent. I look at culture as guilty until proven innocent. And guilty, innocent, you can substitute those words of value and no value, or however you want to. So is there any benefit in, for example, in wearing a hijab, for argument's sake, okay? So I can't see any logical benefit, I'm not going to do it. That would be the thing, because it's all no until you provide proof for it. The Islamic approach is different. We say that anything that is in relation to revelation is untouchable. Because revelation, okay, let me give you the Islamic values, okay? From a Muslim standpoint, we view knowledge on 3 levels. How many levels? 3. There are 3 main sources of gaining knowledge. There's a hierarchy. So we're going to work bottom upwards. The first level of seeking knowledge is what we call hawas al-khamsa, your 5 senses. The second level of seeking knowledge is now the 5 senses, the information you get from there, you feed it into the second level, and this is what we call aql, the intellect, the human intellect, okay? Now after the human intellect, now the question is what happens here? What happens after it reaches the human intellect? So a lot of Western academics will say that's the end of it. Knowledge doesn't go beyond that. It comes from your senses, goes to the intellect, and it stops there. From a historical standpoint, not Muslim yet, but from a historical standpoint, for those who are involved in studying history or tradition, they usually add a 3rd level of seeking knowledge, which is that you now rely on the information transmitted by others. So for example, does Brunei exist? Brunei, does it exist? Yeah. It's a country. It's not a dream, it's a country. Does it exist? Yes. Have you been there? You know of it. How do you know of it? So someone told you. Someone put it on the map, and that map told you. That's why you have to rely on someone else's narration. So you can't just rely on your intellect. We realize that there are certain things that you have to rely on someone else's intellect. Are you with me so far? Senses, intellect, transmission. Now when you come to this discussion of transmissions, the highest authority of transmissions as a believer is revelation. Because it's beyond human beings. And it's not something that's spiritually beyond us that doesn't match our intellect. It's something that's spiritually beyond us, most definitely, but it also has a reasoning that will manifest itself sometimes later on before it even happens. So the Quran talks about things before they even happen. That's the beauty of revelation, that it prophesies things. Okay? When you understand that, now I want you to look at the same issue again. So in the Western academics, we are first negative of things, and we only filter them through 2 phases of knowledge. Senses, intellect. From an Islamic standpoint, we say senses, intellect, narrations, and then at the top within the narrations we talk about revelation. Revelation being the toughest. Being the strongest source of information. Now once you have this framework in your mind, now let's address your issue. Your question was that when we come to a college, we're using our minds so much more, we're becoming so much more academic, and now when we come back to our religion, we have questions of everything. How do we balance between the two, and how do we create harmony? Was that your question?
Yeah.
Is that correct, or is there anything else you want to add to it? That's your question, right? So if that's your question, the first thing you have to realize is that you can't study Islam from a mindset that isn't Islamic. You have to first create the mindset that allows you to understand the Quran. So for example, there's an ayah in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, many are guided through the Quran and many are misguided through the Quran. Have you heard that before? Yeah. It's in Surah Baqarah. يُذِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. That many are guided through the Quran, many are misguided through the Quran. You may have heard that ayah. It's in Surah Baqarah. You start Surah Tarawih, 2nd or 3rd page is right there. يُذِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Many are guided and many are misguided through the Quran. So the scholars at that verse, they explain that guidance to the Quran comes when you read it with the right mindset. But if you don't have the right mindset there, then reading the Quran is not going to guide you, it's going to misguide you. So you can study Western academics, but you have to always maintain the principles and the mindset of a Muslim. Okay? You asked a very tough question. I can give a whole lecture on this, I'm not joking. Okay? The Islamic standpoint is revelation. Then you can try to internalize the intellect and the senses. From a Western academic standpoint, intellect or no intellect, revelation is always that question. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to answer this question completely because there's so many thoughts going through my mind right now, and I want to share them all with you, but I wanted to leave by 9:10. I'm going to make a reference to 2 things. Okay? The first reference I want to make is a ghazal. You ever heard of that name before? Imam Ghazali, he's a very great scholar. Okay. Imam Ghazali, rahmatullahi alayhi, he went through the same challenge you're talking about. He was a young guy, growing, very smart, he debated with philosophers all the time, and he tried to rationalize everything. He tried to rationalize spirituality. He tried to rationalize the Quran and the Sunnah. He tried to rationalize Allah. And where he went to do that, he realized that there was only so far he could go. And after reaching that limit, there were certain things that required an element of trust, that required an element of belief. And because it took him so hard to understand that there were certain things that his mind couldn't comprehend as a human being, he literally went into like a coma. Ghazali stopped eating, stopped drinking, he stopped responding. Doctors visited him, thought he was going to die. And then Imam Ghazali writes in his own biography, Al-Munzil min al-Balad, that Allah saved me by filling light in my heart. Basically, Allah answered my question. What does that mean? It's a spiritual statement. I don't know what that means, okay? Then Ghazali went through that crisis the second time in his life. So, in order to understand your question, one of the most beautiful things, and this is the second thing I'm going to say, one good thing for you to do, if you have access to the internet, in your dorm or at home or something, there is a video on YouTube. It's a biography of Imam Ghazali. Have you seen it? It's called The Alchemy of Happiness. It's really good. Good as an understatement. Okay? It's called The Alchemy of Happiness. It's a biography of Ghazali. Very good. And it addresses your question, not through a simple answer, but by showing you Imam Ghazali's life. Because Ghazali was that young guy or girl who was really challenged by his brain. For him, his intellect was the biggest fitna. He was too smart. You understand? He was so smart. And that was his biggest challenge in life. I think the whole thing is like maybe like an hour 20 maybe. But I would encourage you guys to do, if you have some time, maybe you can make an MSA event out of this. It's something, right? Maybe you can, I'm serious, maybe you can have a showing for it. Maybe you can do a showing for it. Like, if there's a nice screen effort, if you guys are grouped together or guys are real separate, I'll leave it to you guys. But it'd be a nice showing where you learn about Ghazali. It's a very good thing. And I would say that the reason I'm saying for you guys to do it together as a team possibly is because I feel like a lot of you guys will face the same challenges. Those intellectual challenges. I once encouraged some young guys to watch it. They were like, oh, that's so boring. But the reason why they found it boring is because they weren't ready to understand it. So I feel like a lot of you guys at this age, at this phase in your life, will really appreciate it, inshallah. But to answer it very quickly, this may be a very shallow answer. I don't like giving shallow answers, but I'm going to give you one right now in case I didn't cover my bases in this short period. Learn to use your brain to understand revelation, not to reject revelation. So when I'm studying the deen, I'm not trying to reject it. What am I trying to do? Understand it. That's the key word. Use your intellect to understand revelation, not reject revelation. Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi alayhi used to say, I never engaged in a debate in my life without the desire and hope that I would be proven wrong. He said, whenever I engage in debate, I always hope that guy would explain something new to me, I would learn something new. Because if he teaches me something new, that means I understood something. But if I end up beating him, that means I rejected it. What's the cool thing with that? So use your intellect to understand revelation, understand the deen. Don't come here thinking that I'm going to reject the deen, right? I'm not going to answer this question, honestly. I would love to, but it's not really relevant. And I don't know how many guys are even going to think about getting married 4 times. It's one of those things that guys talk about, right? But who doesn't, right? So, and if you're studying it for the sake of knowledge, or because one of your buddies may have brought this up, or someone else have brought this as an objection, you want to study it, there are many refutations. One really cool website that I like a lot that deals with, if you're one of those people who likes giving da'wah, who likes talking about Islam and religion, interfaith and intrafaith, if you like talking about that kind of comparative religion stuff, there's a really cool website called The Deen Show. You guys have all heard of it, right? You guys have. And if you haven't heard of it, it's an awesome resource. The guy who runs The Deen Show, he's actually from Chicago, Eddie Rezovich. He lives probably not even 10 minutes from here. So if you guys have a Jummah open, it might be a good idea to give him a call and ask him to come in. He does go to embassies and focus. But again, he's very comparative faith-based, but good person, awesome guy. And I'm sure he gets some benefits. And so I know sure, like 90%, that he's answered this question on The Deen Show. If anyone ever comes to me with a controversial issue, I just push them there because I don't want to give a whole lecture again that's already been given, or write a whole article up again that's already been written. So we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us all. Sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum.
Takbir. Takbir. Takbir.
Jazakallah Mufti Hussain Kamani for an amazing lecture series.